My name is Linda Lorelle, and I'm asking you to have the courage to listen with an open mind to all of our voices, because our voices matter. Hey everybody, it's Linda Lorelle, and I'm so glad that you joined us for this episode of Our Voices Matter. I have to say it has been a minute since I've checked in with you. I am in the thick of rolling out the Civil Dialogues Democracy Initiative that I've been telling you about, which so far has taken us from Texas to Arkansas and next to Washington, D.C. It is so exciting to see how much our fellow Americans are hungry for a space to have safe conversations about difficult topics without feeling demonized. I'll have a whole lot more to share with you soon as we get more town halls on the books, hopefully coming to a town near you. In the meantime, I cannot wait to share this next conversation with you because it is right in line with the Civil Dialogue's mission. Todd Levinson and André Thomas were freshman roommates at Stanford. Todd is white, André is black. They spent the first 25 years of knowing each other without ever talking about race. One day, they decided to not only talk about it, but to seriously unpack it in a podcast they call Healing Race. Now, before we dive into conversation with them, I want to tell you a little bit more about them. Todd Levinson has years of experience in policy, government, and bridging divides. He also co-led conflict resolution trainings with the UN for leaders from the Pacific Islands aimed at furthering peace and development in their nations. Todd studied and taught moral and political psychology at UC San Diego. André Thomas works in the energy industry at Schlumberger here in Houston. But his passion for collaboration, conversation, and racial diversity are his true calling. And that's why launching Healing Race with Todd was a no-brainer, even though it took 25 years for them to make that leap. And how lucky we are that they did. Our conversation is a glimpse into their hands-on way of helping others look past their differences and find common ground when it comes to race in the United States. This is how you have a civil dialogue. André, Todd, welcome to Our Voices Matter. It is such a pleasure to have you both on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here, Linda.
Well, you know, you guys reached out to me a few months ago to let me know about your show and said you were fans of mine, which is great. I'm always happy to hear that. And I was so intrigued by what you are doing in terms of just having really open, honest, raw conversations about race. Obviously, you got, I'll tell people the backstory. People know the backstory. 25 years, ago, 25 years being friends, never having really talked about race after being in college roommates. So I guess my first question is, what have you learned about each other as a result of what you have been doing with these conversations? So, Todd, I'm going to start with you. What have you learned about André that's been surprising to you?
I'll tell you about the first moment of surprise was I asked him at one point, he talked about the skepticism that he brings to white relationships and the caution that he brings. And, here I am thinking, well, you've been friends with me for 25 years. How did that play out in our own relationship? And in asking him, well, what, when you first meet someone who's white, what's going on in your mind? Like what in your mind is leading to this caution? And, I saw his whole face change, emotion come up, and he talked about his fear for his safety. He said, honestly, being killed by white people. And this is someone I knew for 25 years. We've talked about so much, never about race. And I just had no idea that was an image in his mind since what was it, André, 1998 with the
James Byrd.
Linda,
you may remember the dragging of James Byrd in Jasper, Texas.
East Texas. Yeah. I was
You
on
all
the
were
air
there.
then. I remember it well. Yeah.
So, I honestly just didn't know about. I didn't know what was going on in the background of his mind. And it's not only about threats of physical safety. It's the kind of concern around possible exploitation in some way or being taken advantage of. There's another kind of key moment in the evolution of our conversation where he so the night before we recorded our first conversation, I got a bunch of texts from Andre. And he was like, well, are we going to sign contracts? Are we going to have this in writing? And I'm thinking, of course, Andre, of course we're going to, of course, this is our project 50-50, and I had a little sense of where that was coming from, but, it wasn't, to me, I didn't know the full weight of it. We had a conversation at some point in our dialogue around this idea that Andre has around what he calls the psychology of ownership among white people, that there's this sense of ownership over Black people's lives or what they
And their content
produce.
to create.
And when we had that conversation and we went back and forth about our views about kind of the psychology of white people, in between that conversation and our next conversation, I remembered those texts and everything became clear to me. And the next conversation we had, I said, listen, I had a big epiphany. You sent me a bunch of texts about getting things down in writing. And then you shared with me last time about the psychology of ownership. And what at least I'm thinking is that you thought I was going to take advantage of you in this project together. And he got a huge smile on his face. You're exactly right. We need to get that stuff down in writing.
You got it. You got it. Okay. So Andre, now it's your turn. What did you learn that most surprised you about Todd?
So, give you a little bit of background of myself. I am, I guess you would say, the product of the children of the civil rights movement. And a lot of that, I guess, zeitgeist from that time and the sort of lessons about interactions with white people are still very prevalent in my family. And what I learned about myself and about what Todd is that I was projecting a lot of that onto Todd. So I learned that Todd is a white person who's open to giving Black people grace given their past experiences. As he just explained, right? No wonder Andre would come to me with a sense of skepticism, especially around finances. I mean, Linda, you own businesses. So this is an intimate thing to now be financially tied to this white man in a way that I've never been tied to white people before. So it was an act of vulnerability, but I realized that instead of being an enemy, as sort of the influence of maybe that zeitgeist from history, you can also have white people who want the best for you and who want just to be not only your ally but a partner in your journey. And so it's been a process to open myself up to that because I'm generally a skeptical person and I don't really do optimism, but and Todd is incredibly optimistic. But what's been great about learning that about him is a sense of leaning in and just creating an even better project, right? So I'm glad that he embodies that energy in our partnership together.
So in this project, you've tackled many different issues within the broad context of race in America and what it all means. What is the issue that you haven't tackled yet that you think needs to come to the forefront as you continue to peel back the layers of what it means to be a Black man in America, what it means to be a white man in America, and how you're trying to bridge the gap of understanding?
Shall I go?
Sure, of course.
As
Jump
I
in.
I think about our guests and conversations with my Black friends. I don't really have many white friends anymore. That's kind of ironic, but it's microaggression. I think that's a topic that I definitely want to bring to the forefront of in Healing Race. We all know that we're not living in the 1960s separate water fountains anymore. but we all still feel a sense of tension when it comes to interactions with one another, whether you are male or female, black or white. And as I, listen to guests on the show, they talk about incidents at coworker, like for example, black women and their hair. We have one guest, my best friend, Marin, who was talking about, how you showing up at work in a certain way and having a certain hairstyle can, lead to some people wanting to question, your competency, your being there, etc. And I think microaggressions can be, number one, they're highly subjective. So they're misunderstood because what's a microaggression to another person could be motivated by something else to someone else who's looking at the incident, right? And I think if we have an awareness of what that can look like in the guise of, bias and to a larger degree racism, then it would go a long way for people to, spot their behavior. So I endeavor to make sure that people understand their participation in these events, even if they believe that these racial events don't land at their doorstep. By virtue of being a person in the United States and on this planet, you're a participant in what's going on. And if you're a participant, then you have an awareness of responsibility. And that's a good thing because that means you get to shape the narrative, you get to craft things. And what I love about young people is they're now doing it in their own way. Like they're doing it with respect to their own personal journey. So meeting people who, for example, with the subject of microaggressions, who have not experienced as much, and so they're willing to challenge other Black people or other white people about what is a perceived microaggression. And that's a good thing because now you're getting to the bottom of, okay, what's really going on here? Because you don't want to, what I've learned with Todd is you don't want to mislabel people. One of the biggest things that I've learned in working with Todd is that I'll admit it, I was kind of casually calling white people racist. And I've learned that that's an insult. You're really assaulting a person's character. And so have a care with using that word, right? But there are times when people are behaving in a racially motivated, biased way. And we're living in a time where it can be awfully subtle because all of these large aggressions have been addressed through, social norms and public policy, et cetera.
Yeah. So words matter, right? Words matter. And none of us wants to be lumped into a category where all people, all white people are racist or all Black people are ghetto or, whatever it might be. Not because none of us is all of those things. We are very complex human beings and we all deserve some level of grace. And, we want to try to appeal to each other's sense of humanity when we can. So, Todd, what do you think about what André said? Would you agree that that's an area that you guys need to explore? Or is there another area that?
I do. It hits me in two ways. I'm thinking of two scenes, two moments in our journey with guests. Our first group of guests, they did 3 to 4 hour conversations with one another. And that was by choice. After the first one, they wanted a second one. After the second one, they wanted a third one. I'm sure if we opened it up, they'd have 4, 5, 6, and 7. And there was a moment, I believe, in the third conversation, when everyone was getting more comfortable. There was a connection between them. There was a trust between them where the white female in the group shared, her name's Susan, she shared an incident that she had when she was getting drive-through at a McDonald's, where there was a male who was Black and wearing fatigues, yelled all of a sudden, and she didn't see him. She just heard the yell, and she got startled, and she locked her door. And there was kind of an unpacking of what might have led to that reaction: race, what he was wearing, the fact he was yelling, the fact that he was a male and she was a female. And it led not just to talking through that, but it led to other people talking about how people wearing, military fatigues in some way leads to certain stereotypes, and a house with an American flag leads to certain stereotypes. And I felt like it was one of the most vulnerable parts of that conversation. It was about those little perceptions and narratives that we have and that might lead to saying something, or treating someone in a certain way. And I think in some ways that is the most basic thing we can own in our lives. When André said that we're participants, we might not be making public policy, though, yes, of course, we vote for people and we can advocate in certain ways. But in each of our lives, we come in contact with people on a day-to-day basis, right? And we have what we have in our mind and how that leads to the way we engage with people. And I think that makes a difference. I think it makes a difference. I think having the conversation that André, was talking about also can give a sense of why it's important to talk about the little stuff. Because people will say, and I hate to say that it's little, right? But people will say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, right? And what I have gotten a sense of and tried to at least, walk a mile in the shoes of someone who, if you hear this on a regular basis and you think and you wonder about who might be in front of you and what they might be thinking and how you have to cater yourself, it becomes tiring. And that's the word that I've heard probably more than any from the plethora of guests. It's tiring, and that there's a certain self-concept.
Like when I told you, Todd, that I was told that I was not telling the truth about being a graduate of Stanford University. And then I was subsequently asked the name of the Speaker of the House at the time to prove I had some intelligence. Yes.
Are you kidding me?
Yes, Linda.
What?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I'm like,
so I can see, Linda, how that...
Just call the university.
Yeah, really. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, Linda, so that's an example. And so if there is that wondering about what's in someone's mind, I'll give you the second story that came to my mind. We were in Crenshaw, and we were talking to a young Black male, maybe middle school, high school, I can't remember.
I think about ninth grade.
And we asked him the question, if you were in a multiracial group where we were talking about race, and you knew that people were going to openly, honestly, with sensitivity, address whatever question you might have in your mind, what would you ask them? And he said, why do you have something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, why do you have the negative beliefs you have about me? I'm just a nice person. I'm just a regular person. And it was so simple but powerful. And I asked him, I said, well, with the white friends you have, how do you get to the place where you feel trust, where you don't? I asked him actually first, is that something you wonder when you come in contact with people who are white? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what gets you to the point where you feel more comfortable? And he said, if they invite me somewhere, then I know I can trust them, right? If there's that outreach of friendship, of value, and, that, you asked me, what did I learn? And now I'm thinking back, I did learn what I said. I also learned that even when we're having public policy conversations, like about reparations, that what I have gotten from André over the course of all of these topics is that at the end of the day, you want to know you're cared about just like any other person.
And to speak to
in some way, just like any other person.
To speak to the young man that you're talking about, because earlier in that conversation, he shared that he was, I guess, with a group of friends, and like you go to a corner store, you're hungry, you want a bag of chips, and whoever was the store attendant behind the counter that day felt nervous with having him and the friends in the store. And so they called the police, meaning, I don't know if these kids are going to steal something from me. And the police detained them, questioned them. And this is a jarring incident for a kid who was probably in 8th grade at the time, right? And I said, what were you trying to buy? He said, I just wanted a bag of chips. And I'm like, you could have literally, had it gone a different way, and the police would have been over anxious, perhaps. You could have potentially lost your life over a bag of chips. And the reason, and I want to bring that up very deliberately to for your audience to know where the sense of mistrust comes. So you are going to have a sense of mistrust and being guarded when you are around people, when such dramatic things could happen to you, right? All over a bag of chips. And it takes a lot of patience, a lot of love, and a lot of understanding on the white counterpart well, two things that I've heard. Number one, to be patient with a person through that experience and to help them move beyond it. And also number two, that's where allyship can be, exponentially multiplied, is having those conversations even in private with your white counterparts, white on white conversations on these kinds of behaviors that can stop and put the whole world at ease, right? So, one of the biggest questions that comes out of Healing Race from the Black participants is, and I've even asked Todd, what do you all say about us when we're not around? And I often told Todd, not often, I tell him all the time, like I said, we know what you say because your behavior bears it out. And I don't mean your, meaning Todd or any other of the white people that I've known over the years who will listen to this program, but there are certain themes in reaction to the group of people of which I am a part. And when those themes come to bear, it makes you wonder. I'm like, wait a minute, you all are saying something about this. Like the people who believe I'm not a Stanford graduate, I'm unintelligent. I had a boss tell me that I have low energy, and she doesn't know I host a podcast and was in LA interviewing people. But all of a sudden I have low energy and I'm not engaged,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. So this part of the conversation makes me think about the work that we're doing with civil dialogues. And part of what we do as part of this conversation that we have with people on different topics is toward the end of each event, we bring people together in smaller groups and have a facilitated conversation where you're talking about not even necessarily the topic, but it's a guided conversation so that the people sitting around the table get to know each other. Mm-hmm. They get to share their individual stories that help the rest of the table understand how they came to their point of view on topic X. Mm-hmm. And, just by sharing who you are, where you came from, what you think, what experiences you've had, et cetera. That young man talking about trying to get a bag of chips and the response and what could have happened, and similar things have happened in real life where people have lost their lives over things like that, right? Yes. So I think the other thing, one of the things that's sometimes really that's distressing to me when I hear it is that even when people share their lived experience, there are some who refuse to acknowledge that and say to your face, that didn't happen. That's not your lived experience. I don't believe that happens. This is 2024 in America. I don't believe that happens. That's how far we've come in not respecting each other's right to exist in our skin as we are, as God made us, and that we don't have respect for that other person's humanity, whatever it is. But then to deny that someone has had an experience that they're vulnerable enough to share with you, and then you turn around and say, I don't believe you. And so, André, you're shaking your head and I can see the emotion in your eyes. So tell me, I've obviously struck a nerve. Tell me what you're thinking and feeling as you listen to me say this.
Like I told Todd in the taping of our season of Healing Race, you tell people what's going on and then they say, so what? Or they try to lessen your experience. For me and my friends, we've had interactions with white people where I'll give you one white guy, really, really, really nice guy. And I don't think ill of him. And I was telling him my experience as a Black man and as a gay man and the stressors of all of that. And his response to me is, but you're fine. You went to Stanford. As though, I'm like, Stanford and negative treatment in society have, like, those two things don't have anything to do with one another. So just because I was an academically inclined person, it doesn't mean that I don't have, pain, and pain sometimes is not race oriented. And I think of all of those Black kids and little Black girls who are told just to suck it up, whatever it is. Linda, and I have to share this. This is not a part of Healing Race, but when Todd and I was in California, I had the opportunity to connect with a very dear Stanford friend, a very lovely, lovely woman. And we were at a winery, and I'm like, girl, what has been going on? I haven't seen her since she was 22 years old. And she knows about Healing Race. And she said, my daughter, who is the time of this story, which was a few weeks ago, actually 3 weeks ago, was in 8th grade. She said when she was in elementary school, we live in an area there aren't very many Black people, and she had a white best friend. And she and this white best friend used to do everything together. And one day during recess at the school, the white best friend turns to my Stanford friend's daughter and calls her a monkey and tells her she's a monkey. And then my friend's daughter goes home in tears, bursting in tears. Imagine a Black mother and her Black daughter with frizzy hair coming to her. And the first thing she said is, "Mom, am I ugly? Am I ugly?" And my friend said, "I've always tried to instill in my daughter a sense of pride in her beauty, a sense of pride in her skin color, and especially a sense of pride in my hair." I bring up hair because hair is a very real thing for my Black female friends, because all of them remembered the moment when they learned that their hair didn't swoosh. How white people, young white girls, when they shake their hair swooshes. And with Afro, like, look at me, my hair don't swoosh. It doesn't swoosh. And that's an important moment in elementary school, because a little girl is saying, "I'm different." And then to all of a sudden be called a monkey, and it set off a chain. And what my friend told me, she said, "My daughter has always been confident, but since that day in elementary school, I noticed that she doubts herself. And she's become a little bit more acerbic with people after that day." That changed that little girl's life. And this literally happened, this probably happened about 6 years ago, because she's in 8th grade now, right? And so that tells me the parents are our age, the age of me and Todd, because we all went to Stanford together, all the same class. And I'm like, where would a child learn that? And
That's it. It's learned behavior.
Yes.
Obviously. It's learned. She was taught that.
Yes.
She was taught that. So Todd, when you hear stories like that, and I'm sure, you and André, as you're going about doing these interviews and just listening to him talk like this, what goes through your mind? What is it that, and I know you don't speak for all of white America, but okay, you are the white guy on the show. So I'm going to ask you, what's missing here? What's missing here?
Well, I don't think there's something missing. I mean, I think these stories do have an effect. So we talked with someone in Newport Beach who, is concerned about, why does race have to always be part of the conversation? Why do we have to talk about it so much? We've made so much progress. It's not that things are where we want them to be, but sometimes talking about them so much creates more conflict than it creates solutions, and that kind of narrative, as I'm sure you've heard. And I told him the story about another guest, who was on our show, who described when she had a white best friend, and was invited by that white best friend, wanted to invite her to her church. And the white best friend asked her mom, "Can I, invite her to the church?" And she said, "Well, we can't invite a Black person to our church." And that created the destruction of that relationship, right? Or the other Black female who was on our show, who talked about how she had been in a variety of different schools over her childhood, some that were mostly Black, some that were mixed, some that were mostly white. And when she was at the mostly white school, she had a best male friend they were very close. And over time, they took an interest. She took an interest in him and said, "I'd actually like to go on a date with you." And he turned red in the face and said, "Oh, I can't date a Black girl." And can you imagine? And when I said that particular story to him, he went, "Oof," like it made a guttural sound, right? So even someone who thinks we shouldn't be talking about it, when he hears a story, right, it hits him. Of course, these stories hit. I think the the part that might be, I don't want to say missing, but needs to be added is, can we find a middle ground of understanding where feelings have shaped experience, right? Where history has shaped experience around race, and at the same time be able to have an open dialogue about what the intentions might be, right? So André said that, calling someone a racist isn't always applicable and is an attack on character, right? And we've had times, where he'll tell me stories and I'll say, oh man, that one hits me. The one about the Speaker of the House or about Stanford. And then he might tell another story where I will honestly say, for that one, I really wonder about the intentions of that person. Is this a racial stereotype or prejudice? Is this just some, ignorance? Is this just a lack of, I'm thinking, André, about the one around someone who wondered, whether you would be someone to read the Atlantic or whatever magazine, New York magazine.
So Linda, get this. Apparently Black people don't read the New Yorker. I was literally at a bar and we were having a political discussion. And I said, you know what? I was reading a New Yorker article and I went ahead and shared what I read. And I'll swear, I put my hand on the Lord. The person turned his head and said, you read the New Yorker, Linda? And I was like, yes. Linda, I'm done.
Oh my God.
Listen, in that kind of an instance, what I would say to André openly and honestly is, I just don't know where that comment came from. Could it be that it was some sort of
racial... what doesn't sit well with me, because, and this is another thing I've learned about Todd, is that feels incredibly naive, because to me, had I been a white man in a political discussion who quoted an article in the New Yorker,
you would not have asked that question.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yes. Todd, your point is what?
Finish. The point is, in that particular scenario, I think it's open for that particular individual where they were guided by some kind of racial bias. I think there were other people that could have been questioned that might not be Black. I'm not doubting that could be the case.
I disagree.
And I'm not doubting.
I disagree too.
I'm also not doubting. Let me just say, I'm not doubting the rationale or the history or I have an understanding of why André might feel that way, given the experiences that he's had. But in that particular scenario, I'm not just saying it's an automatic 100% certainty is all I'm saying.
It's not an automatic 100% certainty that he was asked that question because he's Black. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I disagree. I disagree with you on that.
What
else would prompt him to have asked that question?
I mean, a certain vision of André because of whatever he might know about André. I mean, I don't know the specifics, and I was honest about it. I don't know who this person is.
Can I give you a caveat? The person who did it is someone I know, wasn't a stranger, and knows that I'm a Stanford graduate.
Yeah, well,
Why would I not read such?
Because you don't live in
journal publication.
I mean, I could think of a lot of other reasons. I mean, he might.
Okay, yeah, I get your point. I do. I get your point. And if it's somebody who knows you well, he might be well, I don't know.
He just might have a sense of what André does. Right. what he pays attention to. That just might be divorced.
I'll give you a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Not much.
Linda, I'm really also not saying that it might be the case.
Right.
At the very least, I think it's important to have a conversation of what would make you think, and I think André probably asked.
Well, that's the point. That
what
is
would
the point.
You think that I wouldn't, what would make you think that I wouldn't,
Yeah, and that would be André, the podcaster with this podcasting hat on, saying what would make you think that. Yeah. But André, the friend, in the moment is like, what the hell? What do you mean? You're like, why would you even ask me that? Of course I get it. And, we have these emotional, visceral reactions to language and to assumptions about who we are and who we aren't and what we can and can't do.
Yeah.
So, okay. I want to transition the conversation a little bit, to talk about race as it has reared its ugly little head in the current presidential election.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm referring to the remarks that were made by former President Trump about Vice President Harris suddenly turning Black.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, André, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts about the conversation that is being had about race in this election cycle? And just let me know what you're thinking.
Sure. With in particular with Vice President Harris, one of the things that shocked me is the number of Black people that said suddenly she want to be Black, and I'm like, she's always been Black, and like, when did she become an AKA? She's always been an AKA. She was very public about that during the campaign with Biden. They even interviewed some of her line sisters. So it makes me feel that the conversation about race is largely being driven by the news cycle and people with an agenda to, and no disrespect to your profession, Linda, to sell ads And so the opinion varied with whatever channel or YouTube channel you were watching. And people were not sitting back and applying just good old fashioned common sense and reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
Vice President Harris has always been public that she's a biracial person. I believe her mother is from India and her father is of Jamaica. Her mother immigrated to the United States. And this is just a part of her biracial heritage. And it really speaks to a larger conversation. And maybe you'll challenge me here, Linda, is that, sometimes when you are biracial, there may be this pressure that all of your life you have to choose Blackness, right? And I had a very real moment with that. So recently, in LA, I was a tourist. I took the tour of Warner Brothers, which is a really great tour. And part of that tour, I got to visit the All American set. It's a really popular show on CW. And now
I watch it. I love that show.
I'm obsessed with it. And I had never heard of it 3 weeks ago when I was at Warner Brothers. And so I'm like, well, I visited the set. I got to watch the show. And so the mother of the Baker kids is a white woman. And she was talking to her husband. And she said, being the mother of Black kids. And it struck me that this white woman in the script was cognizant of her children being Black and not trying to take on some of her whiteness. And in my opinion, that is a good thing, but it also left a question of, well, what about your Caucasian heritage and how do you engage with that, right? And I think this is an excellent topic to explore in Healing Race. The United States does not know how to be biracial. I think there is a ethos.
There's the one drop rule.
There you are. That's exactly where I was going. And when I have used that in Louisiana logic to tell this was an actual law in Louisiana books, I've always gotten pushback by people who wanted to acknowledge their multiculturalism and their biracialism. And it always felt uncomfortable to me, but I realized why it was feeling uncomfortable, because it felt as though in some way you were dishonoring the Black American experience and the sacrifices. But I said to myself, André, no, they're not. They're just complaining. They are embracing the completeness of their family. And Todd and I heard that a lot in Los Angeles. So Todd would always ask everyone, do racial conversations come up between you or your friends or family? And many of the Black people say, well, I come from a multiracial family. And so, yes, they come up and we have them in a healthy way, right? But I think that is a small pocket of what really goes on in the United States. And when you add to that the news cycle and motivation to keep eyeballs in front of screens, you have a very distorted view of how to have a healthy relationship to your own racial history and to respect the racial history of others. So what do? You lean to the lowest common denominator. So if you don't look somehow like Black, then all of a sudden you're not Black. You're courting the Black vote. And that's anything but what Vice President Harris was doing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
André, what do you think shaped, you started by talking about how there was chatter among the Black community, parts of it, right?
Yes.
Of now she wants to be Black. What do you think shaped, motivated, drove that response from that portion of the Black community?
I can answer this question. Sometimes there is an expectation of how you show up and how you present. Okay, Vice President Harris, this is just André being real. You were a prosecutor, and there is an inherent mistrust between Black people and the law enforcement. And we all know that in the United States, district attorneys are the chief law enforcer. So there's already a suspicion right there. Or, to use an old term from the 90s, are you a sellout, right? So do you really have the best interests of the Black community at heart? And do you really understand our unique needs? So that's part of it. I think another part of it is when you're kind of, Black people sometimes can be very bombastic about who they are, especially when they're a part of a sorority. And you don't know this, Todd, but AKAs and Deltas are huge among just Black American life. It's actually, that is quintessential to the college undergraduate experience for many, many Black people. And I think a lot of Black people didn't realize that she was Black Greek. And so it's like, okay, well, you're Black Greek. Well, how would we know that? And so we're already coming at a prosecutor with a sense of skepticism. Then a person who is married to a white man, and no offense, and then a person who's also been sort of like quiet about their ties in the Black community. It makes you wonder, are you just another politician courting a vote on this sort of identity politics spectrum? And that's why you get them say, well, now you want to be Black because you want our vote. And there's still some skepticism from the Obama years where, because my own brother said, Obama ain't done nothing for us. And I was like, and I pointed to all these things. And, if race plays a part in our tangible, real lives, and if people don't see the needle move on their lived experiences with respect to race, then when a person comes to them because of their race, it feels disingenuous.
So, Todd, what is you? I love the question that you just asked, André, but I'm interested to know what your take is on this part of the conversation as it relates to the election.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a tension in conversations around race about the use of race in one's life. What do I mean by that? I've noticed that on one side, those who don't want to talk about race or think that race should be less a part of how we engage with one another on issues, or even interpersonally, they feel like race is taken advantage of to gain benefits, whatever that might be, right? Some sort of position because of a diversity initiative, affirmative action, or more support in a political race. And what I think is missed from that perspective is at least the people that we've talked to, and André included, is that race is something that one needs to react to on, throughout one's life. It's not someone that someone seek, that's something, it's not. André said something to me at one point. He said, we'd be happy to let race go if you didn't react to us based on the fact that we're Black. If we didn't have stuff coming at us, we'd have nothing to respond to. And what I think is lacked in the understanding of the person who says that, now, is race ever taken advantage of for benefit? I'm sure it does. I mean, people are people, right? There's good, bad, and ugly across the spectrum, no matter what color you are. So is it ever taken advantage? I'm sure it has been, right? But what I think that they miss in terms of people's owning of their identity is that there are real experiences behind that people are reacting to. And they'd be happy to let those experiences go. But when you have those experiences of being treated a certain way because of the color of your skin, you have to react to it, right? It's a part of your life. It's part of self-protection. It's part of navigating life. It's part of just being a human being who has emotions. And so I mean, obviously he said those things for political advantage, right? He was hoping to cast her as disingenuous, and contrived and not authentic in who she is, on a part of her identity that will probably be important as a part of her, candidacy. But what I worry about, even in terms of the larger conversation that he's trying to trigger and wade into, is that I think that people don't, this is getting back to what André kind of wants to talk about in terms of microaggressions, and what I brought up in terms of our everyday perceptions is, I think there's just not a lot of understanding of the day-to-day of how this plays out in people's lives.
Which is why we have to talk to each other and share our individual experiences, and then believe the other person when they tell you what it's like and how they have been impacted.
Exactly. And to understand the motivation behind, not just to know the moments, but and experiences, but also to know the kind of core motivations behind the strength of that identity. You know, I asked André at one point what he thought, like, why Black pride? Why not pride in being a human being? Yeah. Why pride?
I can answer that question for you.
Linda, answer it. Answer it.
Go ahead, Linda. Go ahead.
Answer it.
Well, I mean, yes, we would love that. You know, we all want that. We all want to be accepted for all of who we are.
Yeah.
Okay. We do, but our society does not afford us that luxury. That's the reality.
And so what is Black pride? How does that play a part in responding to not having that luxury? Like, why do you feel Black pride? What does it do for you?
Because we don't need other people. We don't need you to give us our flowers. That's why we have Black pride. Because I don't get my flowers from Todd. I get my flowers from Linda. And my mother is named Linda too. So from that, that's where we get our pride.
So I think I would agree with that. And I think that the strength of the Black community is that in order for us to have survived from the day we were brought here, okay, in order for us to survive, we have had to rely on the strength of each other and within our community. And when I think about, you know, our ancestors and what they had to go through to survive the Middle Passage, survive everything that happened when they got off the ships, and all the horrific everything, okay? Everything that embodied slavery, and the systems and the constructs that were created around it to build this country.
Yeah.
In order to survive that with incoming from everywhere except within our community, that's where Black pride comes from.
Yeah.
That's why it's important, because it's so central to our identity, that in order for us to feel as though we are able to continue that journey, regardless of what happens from external communities, if you will, okay? Yeah. We're proud of who we are. Yeah. I mean, why should we not be? Why?
Yeah, you know, why? So that wasn't. No,
I know you're not asking me.
I wanted to understand. Yeah.
No, I know you, and that was a bad choice of words. But what I'm saying is, every ethnicity, every culture has pride in where they came from, and what makes them who they are. We're no different.
Yeah,
we're no different, except that in this country, our pride is probably at a level that some can't understand, because our history is a history that most have not experienced.
Yeah. And I will say that I actually, even though in my heart and how I feel in my life, I don't feel that way. I do understand it pretty deeply, because coming from the Jewish community, right? And the strength of that identity has been forged in a very similar way through struggles over millennia, right?
Of course.
And I see it play out in my family, that sense of pride. I mean, it plays out in all of our holidays, you know, it plays out over in day-to-day things, you know? So I do understand it. I think people don't really understand it when they make comments like what Trump made, right? When they weigh into this idea that people are just, that it's this kind of superfluous. And the reason I wanted you to talk about it is because I wanted that contrast, right? I think what you just described is what's missing from people's understanding when they think that Black identity is just the superfluous thing that you just leverage as a card in order to get some benefit. There's
It's not.
real
And
humanity and emotion and history
yes,
behind it that is
it's
understandable.
it's all of those things. But let me also say, as proud as I am of being Black, I am equally proud of being an American.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. The two are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
No.
I love this country as much as anyone else who claims to be a patriot. I consider myself a patriot. I love this country. I love being Black. And why this is sort of just a general question, but why am I not allowed to be both?
Yeah.
Why am I not allowed to express my Black identity and my pride in that, as well as my pride in living in a country that I consider to be the greatest, and that I want to do everything in my power to make even better?
Yeah.
And I think the point is, we are all of these things, and all of the elements that make each one of us who we are is the strength, is the true strength that makes us incomparable. It makes us who we are. It's the strength of our diversity. It truly is. And what I don't understand is why we force each other to pick and choose. And you have to be this or you have to be that. We are all a compilation of different races. Okay. I can look at the heritage on my mother's side of the family. My mother is so fair-skinned that when I was a child, I remember sitting in the back seat of my family car. And I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And I said, "Mommy, are you white?" Okay. That's how fair my mother is. She's still with us. She'll be 97 next month. And her mother, her grandfather looked like a white man. So I know I know how the lineage goes. Okay. I haven't gotten back to the point where I can trace who was a slave on what plantation and where the mixing began. Haven't gotten that far back, but clearly it is what it is. Yeah. So yes, I have white in my blood, but when people look at me, they see a Black woman. And that's okay with me. I'm proud of that, but that's not all of who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not all of who you are as a white man. It's not all of who André is as a Black man, as a Black gay man. You're not just gay.
Yes.
You're not just Black.
You know what, Linda, as I hear you talk, and I've done some reading on Eric Forner's books on Reconstruction, right? I love Eric Forner, really great history writer. And all of this, I won't say all of it started back then, but we're still holding on to that cultural zeitgeist of you have to pick. You know, there's a reason they had octoroon. And so, because, I mean, back in the day, your mother would have been able to pass, right?
Oh, yeah, big time.
And the huge social advantage to all of that. And that all came when we start passing laws and public policies based upon appearance.
Right.
And that whole psychology is still with us, and it's hard to let go of because we engage each other on appearance. You know, unless you are a person who's has sight challenges, then you see what you see in front of you. But you also have to remember that you're bringing the weight of history about the interpretation of what you see.
Right.
So my best friend is a dark-skinned woman. Todd knows her. She's been on the show. She was with me in Los Angeles. We were celebrating my bachelor party / 45th birthday last year in Las Vegas, having a drink in a hotel in the casino at 3 a.m. And it happened that this white couple sat next to us, and the husband had the same birthday. And I said, "Yeah, I have this podcast because I always tell white people about the podcast." And it's like, and he said, "Yeah, but I'm a bit of a comedian."
You are so funny. I love it. I love it.
And he said, "Yeah, but you're not Black." And my friend looked and he's like, "Yeah," he said, "You're not Black." And I was like, "What do you mean? I'm Black." He's like, "No, you're not Black." And that's when I realized, okay, so Black for you is not only appearance, but it's a set of behaviors. And if I, in appearance, may look like I'm of the African diaspora, but if I align with white ideals in other ways, then some sort of way I've transcended to make you more comfortable. Because I told him all about the podcast, everything I've ever said to Todd. And he refused to accept that I'm Black. And in a different Vegas trip, Vegas is a hell of a place. My brother, who's the brother whose voice I was mimicking, who's a dark-skinned gentleman, very, very handsome. And we were walking through the casino and we were celebrating my other brother's birthday. And a white man walked up to me, not to my brother, but to me. Keep in mind, I'm light-skinned. My brother is very, very dark-skinned. The white man patted me on the chest and said, "That's a big boy," talking about my brother, right? And I'm like, what is that about? Again, my lightness is making white people comfortable. Again, they're not, I've in some way in their mind, I've assuaged their negative feelings about Black people. Keep in mind, my brother was standing next to me when this white man did it.
Wow. That just, I mean, I'm thinking, I'm gosh, my thoughts are all over the place right now, but
Healing race.
no, I know, but it's such an important conversation to have. And, for all the people out there who say, why do we keep having to talk about this? Why can't we just let it go? Our society isn't ready. We have to talk it through. We have to, the stories that we're sharing with each other right now from each other's perspectives are how we get there, to the point where maybe a generation or two or three from now, it won't even be a thing. Race won't even be a thing. My daughter and her contemporaries, a lot of them are are marrying other races. They just kind of see each other for who they are. They're not as caught up in the whole racial divide as your generation, my generation. I'm older than you guys. So I was thinking back to my Stanford freshman roommate who was white.
I was going to ask you that because that's so much question.
Yes, I was just thinking.
You had the same experience I had with Todd. What was it like, Linda, for that? When I walked in the room and saw Todd, when you walked into the room and saw your white roommate, what happened?
I will tell you, I was not, there was nothing that alarmed me at all, because I grew up in a predominantly white school. I was one of a few Black students in the school. So I grew up around white people.
Okay.
And I was probably as comfortable as any Black person could be with white people back then. Okay. And so I had a frame of experience. I had a lot of white friends in high school. And so it was fine with me. Now, I don't know what she thought. That would be a question for her. But I will tell you that we got along extremely well. And like the two of you, we never talked about race.
Yeah.
We never talked about it.
Yeah. Well, when I first had the kind of moment epiphany that we had never had the conversation, I honestly sat there and reflected, is this part of the problem, part of the solution? Somewhere in between, and I still don't know I obviously we're doing Healing Race. I believe in having the conversation. But there is also something to being able to engage, not on that basis, as you're forming a relationship, if that's where your head is, right? You might have stereotypes, but, André and I connected based on our personalities, based on who we are, very, very, very quickly. And so did that help us? Probably, but was there a big gap that I now can realize looking back? Yes, there is. Of course there is. When you are relating to another human being, you want to know what's happening inside that human being and what their experiences are. And to the extent that race played a role in that, then to connect to André is to connect to that part of the conversation. And so, I appreciate that your roommate and you engage that way. And I appreciate that André and I engage that way. And I also think it doesn't preclude, in terms of do we have to choose one or the other? It doesn't preclude being able and the necessity and importance of having these conversations, because they really do matter. Linda, you saying, wow, I also feel, pride in being an American. that has an influence on people. When André says what he said about, maybe I throw out races too casually, that has an influence. In reverse, when we have someone who was in our latest group who, was wondering, what is this, white privilege thing? Let me tell you about my background as a white male, now conservative, right?
I've had that conversation
But
too.
when he then can be told, well, you building your business by a black man being told isn't white privilege, but let me tell you what it is. That took effort to do. I understand that took effort, but let me tell you what it is. And then for him to be able to say, I get it. I get the ways where there might be inequalities, inequities that might lead to different opportunities, right?
Yeah.
When they can affirm that background and that experience and find a way to piece together an understanding of the world that is a shared understanding of the world, that matters. It really matters. When you shared, why do you have to choose? I totally get that question. I totally get that. What I would also add to it is, just from a perspective of someone who, Andre's first question to me, what was it like growing up white? That was his first question to me.
And I said, it must be nice.
And I said, Linda, honestly, I didn't ever think about it.
Right.
And I understand that as a luxury. I do. But I never thought about it. I just did it. Now, are there people who feel white pride? Yeah, there are. But like for a good number of white people walking around, it's not something
that you really think about, but it's something that every black person thinks about what it's like to grow up black. That's the difference.
Yes. And so it's just a disconnect in understanding and experience.
Right.
But being able to hear the experiences that you had helps to give an understanding. And the way you passionately spoke about the meaning behind your pride hopefully gives something human for someone to grab onto, to go, okay, maybe I don't understand that with regard to race, but I have pride in some group. Even being a proud American is to be proud of some identity that you have that was forged through some set of experiences. We broke off from England, right?
From George
exactly, because we felt we were being abused and persecuted. There is there's a reason we have pride, right? And so hearing that hopefully will touch someone in some way where we go, okay, I don't get it racially, but I get it as a human. And now I get it as you explain your experience, and maybe have, if not a connection, at least an understanding.
Exactly. And that's what we're all trying to get to. So I have to say, I could talk to you guys for hours, and I am so thankful that you reached out to me, that we've connected. I love Healing Race. I love what you're doing on the podcast. I can't wait to see more of the work and the stories and the understanding and the healing that you put into the universe, because it's just so critically important. Conversations just like this they're the answer. I'm sorry, but I just believe that this is where it starts. Is in having these kinds of honest, open conversations. I'm enormously grateful to the two of you for taking time to share yourselves with the Our Voices Matter audience. Thank you so much.
We very much appreciate being on.
Absolutely.
Are you ready to have your own civil dialogue about race or any other challenging topic? I know it's scary, but you can do it. Just approach it with curiosity and a desire to listen, learn, and share. If you do take that leap, I would love to hear from you. Tape a short video talking about your experience and send it to us. You can find a link to do that in the show notes of this episode on ourvoicesmatterpodcast.com. You can also find a link to the Healing Race podcast and the latest on civil dialogues. Thanks again to André and Todd, and to you, of course, for being part of our efforts to illuminate our common humanity. We'll see you next time.